Okay, everyone, so welcome to the Purple Table Talk. This is a roundtable discussion that we do to hopefully bring awareness to addiction and recovery. And today we're going to be discussing, unfortunately, losing a loved one to substance use. So before you guys introduce yourself, I just want to go ahead and set some ground rules. So do not feel obligated to share, only share what you feel comfortable with sharing. Don't feel like you have to say anything at all. Be respectful to others' viewpoints, and then try to avoid language that may be triggering or offensive to others. So I'll start off. My name is Shelby Valentine, if you don't know me. I work for Brandywine Counseling. I'm a prevention specialist. So essentially, what we did before COVID is we would travel the entire state of Delaware doing presentations, programs, pretty much what anyone needed us to do on HIV, STDs, drugs, and alcohol to primarily middle schoolers to college students. So whoever wants to start, go ahead.
I guess I'll go. I'm Katie Henault. I am a middle school teacher, social studies. Unfortunately, my life has been impacted by addiction in more than one way. And I have spent almost the last 10 years working to advocate for better addiction treatment services in Delaware, and just the connection between mental health and substance abuse that seems to be lacking so much in our area, unfortunately.
Savannah, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Savannah. I am actually an addict myself in recovery. So addiction has impacted me that way, and I've also lost a sibling to overdose after I got clean from it. But I work at a car dealership in my normal life and do photography on the side, but I have been trying to also advocate for better treatment options like rehabilitation instead of incarceration, or things to just treat addiction at its what I think is its root cause, and not necessarily punish somebody for something that they can seek help with. Yeah.
My name is Dave Humes. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I also do advocacy work with a group here in Delaware, Attack Addiction. And the reason I do this work is because I lost my son, Greg, to an accidental heroin overdose. He was a little bit shy of his 25th birthday.
Okay, guys, so I have 4 questions for you. Again, don't feel obligated to share, only share what you feel comfortable with. And it's open, so whoever wants to start, whoever wants to talk can go ahead and lead. So our first question is, would you be willing to share a little bit about your loved one and how they unfortunately passed away?
I'll be happy to. My son, Greg, started experimenting as young people are wired to do when he was in late middle school, early high school, and he kept progressing and progressing, and it led him to heroin. And we know that illegal drugs lead good people to bad places. In my son's instance, it led him to prison. He did a stint of approximately 21 months and was released. After being released for a period of about 10 months, he violated his parole and was sent back and did another 11 months till he was released. Fortunately, his second term in prison, he really started getting serious. And I remember him saying to me, he said, "I don't want to spend the rest of my life in institutions, whether they be rehabilitation or correctional institutions." And this I thought was a big breakthrough. When he was released, Greg lived with me. He lived under my roof. And he also worked part-time for my business. I have a small niche business at the time. A lot of it involved being in a car, going to construction sites and whatnot, some far away. So we had a lot of time to talk, which was very good. He had 17 months of sobriety. And one night he went out, as he was reacclimating his life, he went out with some friends of his, the good guys in his life, and I was okay with that. Unfortunately, he ran into some of his old running mates. And when he did, he thought he could use one more time. And we know when you've been away for any extended period of time, your resistance changes. And unfortunately, he overdosed and died that night. The people he was with, rather than calling 911, put him in his own car. They carried him into his own car. They drove him to the parking lot of the hospital, and they got out and they walked away. They did not hit the key fob on the car. They did not go to the emergency room doors and hit the red button and run like crazy. They didn't go a block away and dial the numbers and say, good, go look in your parking lot. They merely walked away, and because of that, Greg died. By the time he was discovered, it was about an hour or so later, and they rushed him into the hospital, tried to revive him, but by that time he was gone too long. He was an organ donor, so because he had sat so long, he couldn't be an organ donor. And again, that's what happens when people look to protect them and cover their own selves rather than doing the right thing and seeking help.
So I lost my boyfriend of 6 years, and then his brother, who was one of my best friends, just a short few years later. Jeremy was the first boy I ever loved. I was 15 when we met and just shy of 21 when he passed away. And it was a very similar situation to Greg's. He had been clean for a lengthy period of time and then thought that one last use wasn't going to make much of a difference. And unfortunately, it was that situation that ended his life. He was at home when it happened, and his brother found him. And unfortunately, the strain of that night on his brother's addiction was a trigger. And so the next few years that JN was with us, he spent in and out of jail and in and out of recovery. We unfortunately lost him. He had just been released. He was incarcerated in North Carolina, so he wasn't even close to family and friends. He was found in a halfway house. And so that strain, unfortunately, led him to make poor choices. And I assume, and just based on the conversations we had had prior to his death, that he had very much struggled with the guilt of his little brother's death. And so I lost two people who had been in my life for a very long period of time, and watched what Jeremy was a binge user, so he could go long periods of time without using, and unfortunately his mental health was a significant trigger in his use. So when he would have periods of depression and anxiety, he would use, and that would be the way to get the demons out of his own head. And when his brother was very much a very Class A addict. He was very good at hiding it. He was very manipulative and found ways to skirt around it, and you wouldn't know that he was using for months. And then unfortunately the signs would start to add up. But he had those classic addictive signs and symptoms, and where Jeremy didn't, which made getting him help and getting him into recovery much harder, because it was very hard to differentiate what was depression and what was addiction. And it unfortunately, when you lose two sons in the same family, that takes a toll. They were a family of 3 boys, and so now their oldest brother, who thankfully has no addiction, but their whole family and the dynamic of all of our lives and everybody that's known them has changed so significantly because of the impact so close together.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, my phone keeps overheating and crashing, so I wasn't sure if it was working still. My sister and I actually used together for many years, and She introduced me to pills, and then I introduced her to heroin, unfortunately. And we never really knew how bad it was, or we didn't realize how bad what we were doing was, because unfortunately we didn't have a good example set for us. And we weren't really told right from wrong by our parents in regards to the company we should keep or the things we should be doing. And it just got out of hand. The progressive severity of addiction just kind of happened characteristically. And then at one point in very early 2014, I decided to get clean, and my sister continued to struggle with that for the next few years to come, between incarceration and trying to make geographical changes to, change people, places, and things. Unfortunately, her addictive tendencies and her compulsion to use followed her wherever she had gone. And she, shortly before her overdose and subsequent death, she expressed frustration and wanting to get clean, but not having good resources where she was at in Ohio. And I offered my assistance and experience with the recovery I was working here in Delaware. But I don't know, I had left a 12-step fellowship meeting one Saturday night and had a bunch of missed calls, and I found out by phone she had been found dead on her bed after being there for about 6 hours. And yeah, it's tough, man. My life has been plagued with this giant grief hole, but if anything, it has just kind of strengthened my resolve to not want to relapse and return to those hard drugs. And I've been clean off of those kinds of drugs for 6.5 years now. But it still nags at me. It kind of just eats away at me. But I don't know. I don't think that she had a fair chance because she continued to be incarcerated instead of rehabilitated.
I am so sorry for each of your losses. I want to start off with that. And thank you guys for sharing, because I know this is not an easy conversation to have at all. So our next question is, how has losing a loved one impacted your life?
Okay, I'll lead off again, I guess. When Greg died, I had a small business, and I was talking to some people, and I decided that I would shut that business down, and I would try to take some sort of action about this disease to save lives. And I made a vow to Greg at that time that somehow, some way, I would save a life in his name. And it didn't matter to me if I ever knew who the name was of that person or they knew my name. When I met with the investigating detective to collect Greg's belongings after his death, the detective said to me, if we had a 911 Good Samaritan law or Narcan law, your son might very well be alive today. And as I was going through the process of shutting down my business and trying to figure out how I would fulfill that vow to Greg, those words kept ringing in my mind day after day after day. And I decided that would be a good way to save lives, to see about getting 911 Good Samaritan laws passed, and to get access to naloxone for community members in order to keep them alive. So that's what I set out to do, and I was fortunate. I mentioned I'm part of a group called Attack Addiction, and the world works in strange places. It led me to Brandywine, where I volunteered with IOP groups for a while, and also led me to the doorstep of Jeannie and Don Keister, who founded Attack Addiction. And we've been working on legislation and laws, and I call us a bunch of little Dutch boys. We see holes in the systems, and we go stick our thumbs in there and try and do some good along the way. So one instance, I had somebody from the States said to me, I don't know how you get up in the morning. And I said to them, it's why I get up in the morning.
Well, I guess there's no part of my life that hasn't been affected by losing at that point, the love of my life and my very best friend. It was my freshman year of college, August of my freshman year of college. So I decided that after the initial shock had worn off and I started to finally kind of see things for what they were, that I was going to find some way, somehow, to use it and to benefit someone, anyone. I didn't even care who. I just knew that I wanted to do something that was going to benefit others. So I decided that I was going to change my major from elementary education to behavioral science and analysis. And I spent the rest of my undergrad researching comorbid disorders, mainly substance abuse and mental health disorders. And I was in the process of applying for jobs in that area when I got a job. I had been a paralegal through most of my undergrad to support myself through college and truly to keep my mind busy after what had happened. And I got a job at the Delaware Department of Justice up in Wilmington under Kathy Jennings at the time. And I worked in a department that I helped manage the substance abuse and mental health court programs that the state runs. And through those programs, I met a lot of people. Attack addiction was one of those resources that I was constantly in contact with. And part of my job was to look at pleas that we would be giving and decide whether, instead of incarceration or instead of probation, whether there was a substance abuse court program that would better benefit those people that whose files had crossed my desk. And unfortunately, there were many holes in the system. There were so many people who could have benefited from those programs who fell through those cracks. And after a while, the job just became so taxing and so burdening. And I felt like what I was doing was not enough. And so I decided to leave DOJ and worked in a private firm for a while before I decided to go back and get my master's in education. And I currently work for a school that works with students who, middle and high school students who are troubled, who have behavioral issues. A lot of them have mental health issues. And we use an approach that many school districts don't use, where we really work on the whole child. It's not just about education. I think a lot of the work that I do is about building relationships and trust with my students, and hopefully getting them out of a place where they could fall through the cracks and into a place of solid ground. And unfortunately, Jeremy was one of those people who fell through the cracks. He did the court substance abuse programs and was on probation, and was still able to still fall through those small cracks that happen so often. So I feel like my job now, I see a lot of him in my students, and I'm very open with them about my story and where I've been at in my life, and the signs that I did see in him when he was alive, I'm able to see in them. And it's a conversation that we're able to have on a trusting basis that I think it's very hard for some of my coworkers and their peers to really understand where they're at, but I do. And if I can be that one stepping stone for them to get to a better place, then I feel like I'm doing them a service.
So I feel like I also think that my entire life has been impacted by this. As I had mentioned, it has been a motivator for me to continue to remain abstinent and not revisit those drugs or those people and places. But I've also been diagnosed with PTSD surrounding it. This is super triggering for me, so I'm sorry that I'm so emotional. It's been very intrusive and repetitive thoughts about it nonstop since it happened in 2016. And my life's been really hard since because I'm still struggling to find the right combination of spirituality and faith and medication to really help. I've been seeking some alternative medication practices lately that have been more useful and really good for my symptoms. So there's some hope there, but I feel like my entire life surrounds it now. I feel like I don't have an identity anymore. I just feel like everything I talk about, everything I feel, good, bad, or indifferent, it all points back to my sister's death and the guilt associated with it. The survivor's guilt, the guilt that, I was an accomplice to her addiction, and I've just had a really rough time. Some days worse than others, wanting to get out of bed, wanting to live. And I have a hard time congratulating myself or celebrating milestones in my life because it's just an aching, it's just still searing, hot, fresh grief. And then I also think that there have been some positive impacts on my life because it has also shown me that there's nothing that I can't get through. Not saying that nothing's going to be difficult emotionally or anything like that, but I've just learned that there are some losses and pains that will never even compare. Everything difficult that I've faced since pales in comparison to getting through that first year and the fight that I'm still going through now. But yeah, it's been rough. My life has been very dark, more days than it has been light since her death, unfortunately. But I'm very open about it, and unfortunately I've had to be there for other people who have also lost siblings to it. But I'm super grateful that I can at least be there for somebody else and that they don't have to feel alone, because when it happened, I felt like nobody understood or cared. I know that people cared, but it changed my whole perspective. And another positive impact, I think, is I don't give so much thought and time to the little things that inconvenience me or upset me anymore, because it's just everything's so temporary and life is so fleeting. So it has helped me appreciate the good things and not give so much headspace to the bad things.
Thank you, guys. I am very fortunate, and I haven't lost someone to substance use, but I have watched other people go through it. Savvy was one of them. I'm probably gonna start crying. It is probably one of the most difficult things to watch, is to see someone go through that. It was really hard to watch her. We were working together. It was hard to watch her go through that. It's hard to hear you guys a little bit. It's hard to hear you guys talk about it, because it's just, it's something you don't want anyone to go through. So definitely thank you guys for sharing that. So we touched a little bit on it about people falling through the cracks, and how individuals in active addiction are kind of thrown into jail rather than trying to get them treatment. So what do you guys think that could be changed within the substance use community so that more loved ones aren't lost?
I think that, a start, and it may need to be revisited a bit, or the drug court certainly would be one area where, given judges the jurisdiction to provide alternate treatment. I think in Delaware, in comparison with other states, we're more progressive. I think we're looking at these things with some of our leaders. That they truly are trying to divert people to get help rather than to punish them for disease. We've seen it, with the drug courts. We've seen it now with things like many of the police departments coming up with programs. Newcastle County Police have their Hero Help program. There's Angel programs down in Dover. Middletown has a program that they are taking people and they're getting them help. They're getting them into detox, and then they're also, getting them into treatment after that. So that's one of the things we're doing. And another thing I'll touch on, because most people don't know about it, was very little publicized. One of the things we worked on here in Delaware was, in June a year ago, we passed a thing called the Opioid Impact Fee Bill. And what that bill does is it charges a slight fee to the manufacturers of opioids that are sold in the state of Delaware. And all that money goes into a separate pot. It doesn't go into the general fund. And we were really fortunate, because now with the COVID, that money would be gone. We're actually collecting this money. And the idea is that it's going to help the people who, I like to say, who have been drugged into addiction by these opioid manufacturers with their, hardcore marketing and everything, and go directly to help those kind of people. And, we're negotiating a little bit with the state on how we go about spending that money. One of the big things is getting moves on people's heads. It's one of the things that we do at Attack Addiction. We have 5 different sober living houses for men and women. The state is doing things like the Bridge Clinic, so there can be some follow-up after, after somebody has come out of rehab, maybe has come out of prison. So there are some things that are being done, but we need to step up that effort. And I look at our original reaction to COVID, and I saw press conferences every day talking about it. We should be doing the same for opioid addiction as well. And we need to keep pressing our public officials to keep that in focus, especially now during COVID, because we know that, there are large spikes in overdoses and overdose deaths here in Delaware.
I think one of the biggest things I think about in the changes that we need to make, especially in Delaware, we are a very small state, but the ratio of people that we have that require addiction services is very large. And unfortunately, we don't have as many inpatient services with as many beds as we need. And programs like Brandywine and Attack Addiction, they do the best they can with the resources that they have, but it seems like it's never enough. There's always one more person who needs one more bed that's not available, or one more person who needs one more treatment facility and there's no more room. And I think when we think long term about how we can combat the addiction in Delaware, is having more treatment centers available, and then being able to extend the length of time that a person is able to stay in those facilities. If you ask any addict if 30 days is enough for them to overcome recovery and into recovery, they're going to tell you no. 60 days, even a year isn't long enough. And when we look at our healthcare system, there's not enough insurance coverage or money, or private money that a family can pay out to help their loved one stay in a center long enough to feel comfortable that when they re-enter the world, that they are confident that they have the tools that they need to stay sober, and the resources that they need to continue treatment. I also think another one of the big issues that we have is the rate of men and women that we see come out of jail and then very quickly re-enter the system, generally for the same offenses. And I can tell you that working in that system for so long, that rate is astronomically high. And what we need to, I don't have the answer to what we need to provide those people to help them have a better outcome in life. I just know it's there, and that's something that we need to look into and be able to provide to them, because if they're not receiving the help that they need, then their life is just going to continue that circle where they reoffend, and then eventually they're tossed back into reincarceration for a lengthy period of time without ever having the chance to really step up and say, okay, you've provided me everything possible. This is on me now. I don't feel like they have been given that opportunity to say, okay, it's my fault this time. Now that I'm back in jail, most of the time they say, I have not been given what I need to be successful.
And we focus on some of the prevention and rehabilitation, but the other thing that gets little attention is post-recovery care. Because if you talk to the medical professionals, they tell you it takes 2 to 3 years for the brain to fully rewire and to heal. And Savannah, I have to tell you, you're a hero. To have that long of recovery, seriously, you're a hero, because you're well on your road to recovery. You've got more than 3 years, and keep looking forward. You can take a peek over your shoulder to remember where you came from, but keep moving forward, because truly you are a hero. Now I'm the one tearing up. So.
Yeah, I agree. Most people can't say that they've made it to where you are at, and I think that so many people can live by your example. And I know your past is so hard pressed, but you have a story that people can look to for guidance.
Thank you both so much. And what you guys had to say, I really couldn't say it any better, but the preventative, even dating back to elementary school, you get told not to do drugs, but you don't really, I just don't think that I don't recall ever believing the severity of these kinds of things. And I don't know, man. And I have personally had friends who have been one of those, cycling in and out of the system, repeat offenders. And it got to the point where they even were institutionalized in an incarceration-based recovery program, only to go to visits and write with them and find out that they're just kind of there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're punished when they do wrong, and they're given chores. And I don't think that, although I believe those things build routine and character, which are really nice minor details to a successful life without drugs, I don't think it suffices. When I've had some pretty major arrests because of my addiction, and the things I did to my ways and means of getting more drugs included drug dealing. And I remember when I think I had contact with Delaware State Police like 4 times in 2 months, maybe more times in less of a span of time than I can even remember. And every time there were a few officers who really treated me like a human and made me feel understood, but there were also times where I felt mocked, because I don't think that people who haven't experienced it fully grasp the powerlessness. Like once you're there, you can want to not use anymore as much as you want, but it's just a compulsion. And I was also told while in handcuffs, we're going to get you some help. And I was never given help. I was given charges and I saw them in court. And I think I'm very fortunate that I haven't died, let alone, I'm just very fortunate that my history with substance abuse, particularly like my drugs of choice were heroin, crack, and PCP. And I feel very fortunate and blessed that when I was done, because I know that's not everybody's story. But besides the prevention and the lack of resources when people are getting into legal trouble regarding it, just like you guys said, I don't think that there is enough, there's not enough concern placed on the time it takes biologically for somebody's brain to kind of get back to normalcy or visit normalcy for the first time. And I don't think that there is enough concern placed on that, the fact that it is going to be a lifelong battle and that people need followed up with, and people need lifelong resources. And I don't think there's a lot of accessibility leaving treatment programs or leaving incarceration or institutes. And I don't think that, what was I going to say? I lost it. Oh, and like it was mentioned previously, if anything, I feel that some facilities are moving backwards. There are facilities in Delaware that used to be long-term, I think 9 to 12 months, that are now 30-day programs because they don't have the bed space to accommodate enough people for that long. And I'm not sure if it's profit-based because of the amount of patients they see, the more insurance payments they get, or if they are hoping that the more people they touch, the more success stories that we will see. But I think either way, we absolutely need more long-term facilities. I think we need more resources for people who are just starting to get into trouble with it. I think that children in school need to, I don't know, perhaps have more graphic detail about what is to come if they choose to experiment, and maybe some more about the biological effects it has, even just one time using, and how it can change the way your brain is forever and how you will obsess about it no matter what kind of moral or religious standing you have. It doesn't discriminate. But that's my take on it. I just think that I don't think that people don't care. I just think that people don't understand the severity of it.
I could not agree with you guys more. I think you guys are on point, especially because we work, like we have our drop-in centers, so we see a lot of people in active addiction and kind of in and out of incarceration. So you guys are spot on. All right, so for our last question, it would be, what advice or guidance would you give to other families who are grieving the loss of a loved one to substance use based off your experience?
Well, they have to understand, number one, they're not alone. They're not alone. There is support out there, and they have to be given the time to grieve in their own way. You can talk to people and say, I'm there. You can dial the phone up when we need you, when you need to, but you have to allow them the space to grieve in their own way. If you can at all, there seems to be a lot of anger involved, and if there's any way that you can help them relieve their anger is another thing. There are support groups out there. I know we run 3 different support groups each month. We're doing it all virtually, of course, like everybody else right now. There is a group that's called Parents Empowering Parents. They're trying to help people who are finding out that they have a loved one in use for the first time, or who have lost someone, to get through it. So there are resources out there on the d.com calendar. There's a list of events that not just attack addiction, but other nonprofits and other treatment providers where they do run different types of support groups and family counseling groups. So they're a good source because you need to talk to the people who have been there, that have walked in those shoes and can truly understand.
So I think one of the hardest things about losing someone to addiction is, Savannah touched on this earlier, the survivor's guilt. When you lose someone to addiction who was an active addiction for a very long time, there's a lot of feeling of, what could I have done different? Could I have saved them? And I think one of the hardest things to overcome is not burdening yourself with that to the point where you are hindering your ability to be able to grieve and to move on. And you never move on. Jeremy and I's family, we have a saying, and it doesn't seem to get easier the more years that go by. It just gets different. The grief still hangs over you, and missing them will never go away. But it seems that the longer that time goes on, it's not as fresh, and that makes it feel different in each anniversary that comes or each birthday that comes. It doesn't hurt any less, but it doesn't necessarily hurt any more either. And when you get to the point where a number of years have passed by, and I think it's important to still allow yourself to remember that person and to allow your memories with them and your time with them to be a part of your current life. I know that I, over the years, have seen a lot of people who, this is my past boyfriend. I've dated since him. I've been married since him. And people kind of look at me in a sense, and they're like, why do you still carry him with you so consistently? And because that's part of my way to grieve, holding on and being able to remember who he was in my life is part of what helps me move forward as well. The experiences that I had with him have shaped me to be the person that I am today, and without those experiences, I wouldn't be the person that I am now. And so I'm thankful for those experiences, both good and bad, and I allow them to continue to motivate me to move forward with my life. And so I don't think, of course, it's a terrible situation. I would never wish on my worst enemy the feelings that I have felt because of these losses. But I also think that if you have to go through this situation, finding a community that you can try to do some good in, and even just going and having one person that you talk to can change your outlook on everything so significantly. And
one of the things I've also tried to do, rather than observe the date of Greg's death, I tried to let that pass as quietly as possible. And on his birthday, I make the choice to celebrate his life, because there was so much good in his life, and that's been helpful to me.
I don't know. I know that there is no magic words that are going to make anybody's experience with this any easier, but like they said, you're not alone. Other people unfortunately go through this. A lot of people are still, about to experience this for the first time. And I just think that it is so important to talk about it, if and when you're ready. Be entirely transparent with the feelings that you're experiencing, even if they don't seem like they're linear or make sense. Just don't hold it in. The times that I find myself trying to shove it down or
hold it in because it's been too long for it to be an acceptable thing for me to be affected at work by it or something like that. It will fester and I will have a really bad time for several weeks following where it feels like it just happened again. And I think it's very important to allow yourself to kind of view where they're at now in whatever way makes you feel whole the most. I know for some people, they like to just believe their loved one is in, their religious heaven or whatever. I like to think that my sister is with me in her spirit body. I can't see her, but I think she's there. And I like to talk to her when things get rough. And I'm still struggling with this, but I think it's very important to allow yourself to smile and laugh and enjoy things.
That's what they would want.
Yeah, and I know that it's what they would want, but it's also so hard to let myself do sometimes. So thankfully there's social media, and thankfully my sister had social media, and it, I'm linked to it still today. And like, if I see something that makes me think of her, I'll just tag her in it, and it makes it feel less harsh. Like if I see something that I think she would think was hilarious, I'll just tag her in it, and it makes me feel better. So I think maybe seeking professional help or seeking the help of somebody who's experienced this to just kind of sort through your own grief and find your own way to grieve and like allow yourself to do that without shaming yourself is so important.
I agree. I don't think that it benefits anybody, especially yourself, when you decide to hold it in and push it down. It does come back with a vengeance, and it's one of those things where it's uncomfortable to talk about it, and it's uncomfortable to deal with it, but it's even more uncomfortable to pretend it didn't happen.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Hopefully we are impacting someone, and all of your stories is either helping someone who may be dealing with someone in active addiction or helping someone that unfortunately just lost a loved one. So I know this was a really difficult conversation, but I really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelby, for having us.
Thank you.
All right, guys, let me go ahead and stop.